Annual crops are work. Every spring you plant, every fall you harvest. Every year you start over from scratch. You're trading labor for food on a 12-month cycle that never ends. Trees are different. You plant a tree once, you wait, and then it feeds you for decades, sometimes for generations. There are 8 trees that will produce more food over their lifetime than you could grow in annual gardens of equivalent space. Number 5 produces 200 to 400 pounds of chocolate-flavored pods per year that store for years without processing, and survives droughts that kill everything else. Number 1 can feed a family of 4 entirely from a single tree, and was the primary food source for entire civilizations. These aren't ornamental trees. These are food production systems that your great-grandchildren will harvest from. The best time to plant them was 20 years ago. The second best time is right now. 8. Mulberry trees, the forgotten fruit that feeds itself. Mulberries are the tree that grocery stores don't sell because the fruit is too delicate to ship. It bruises if you look at it wrong. This means most people have never tasted a mulberry and have no idea what they're missing. Mulberry trees are absurdly productive. A mature tree can produce 50 to 80 pounds of fruit per year. The fruit ripens over several weeks, which means you're not overwhelmed with everything at once. And the fruit is sweet, nutritious, and doesn't need processing. You pick it and eat it. But here's what makes mulberries a survival tree. They require zero maintenance. You plant the tree and then you ignore it. No pruning necessary. No pest control needed. No fertilization required. Mulberries tolerate poor soil, drought, and neglect. They just grow and produce. The trees grow fast. A mulberry planted from a sapling will produce fruit within 3 to 5 years. That's quick for a fruit tree. Compare this to apples, which take 6 to 10 years to produce meaningfully. Mulberries were historically important food sources across Asia and Europe. In parts of Afghanistan and Pakistan, dried mulberries are still a staple food stored for winter consumption. The fruit is approximately 10% protein when dried, which is exceptional for fruit. You can eat mulberries fresh, dry them for storage, make them into jam, ferment them into wine, or freeze them. The leaves are edible and nutritious. They're what silkworms eat, which gives you an idea of their food value. Plant a mulberry tree in a spot where falling fruit won't be a problem. The tree will drop berries for weeks. Choose either a white, red, or black mulberry variety depending on your climate. Water it for the first year until established. Then ignore it and collect fruit every summer for the next 50 plus years. 7. Hazelnut trees. Calories and fat. You can store. Most fruit trees produce food that's high in sugar and water, but low in calories and fat. Hazelnuts are different. They're calorically dense, approximately 2,800 calories per pound, and high in healthy fats and protein. This matters for survival. Sugar is nice, calories and fat keep you alive. A mature hazelnut tree produces 20 to 30 pounds of nuts per year. That's 56,000 to 84,000 calories from a single tree. And hazelnuts store for over a year in the shell without refrigeration. This is shelf-stable, nutrient-dense food that you grow once and harvest annually for decades. Hazelnuts grow in temperate climates and tolerate a range of soil conditions. They start producing in 3 to 4 years from planting. They're relatively pest-resistant compared to other nut trees. Historically, hazelnuts were a significant food source in Europe. During food shortages and famines, hazelnuts provided critical calories and fats when grain crops failed. They were gathered from wild trees and cultivated trees alike. The trick with hazelnuts is that most varieties need cross-pollination, meaning you need at least 2 different varieties planted to get good nut production. But once established, they produce reliably for 40 to 50 years with minimal care. You can eat hazelnuts raw, roast them, grind them into flour or butter, or press them for oil. The oil was traditionally used for cooking and lamp fuel. Every part of the nut has value. Plant 2 or more hazelnut varieties for cross-pollination. Choose varieties suited to your climate. Some are more cold-hardy than others. Water during establishment. Harvest nuts in fall when they drop naturally or when the husks turn brown. Store in a cool, dry place. You've just created a calorie-producing system that will outlive you. 6. Fig trees. Biblical food security. Figs show up repeatedly in ancient texts and historical records as symbols of prosperity and food security. There's a reason. Fig trees are outrageously productive and adapted to harsh conditions. A mature fig tree can produce 100 to 200 plus pounds of fruit per year. Some large trees produce significantly more. The fruit is sweet, nutritious, and can be eaten fresh or dried for long-term storage. Dried figs were a staple food in Mediterranean and Middle Eastern cultures for thousands of years. Figs tolerate heat and drought exceptionally well. They grow in poor, rocky soil where other fruit trees struggle. They require almost no care once established, and they start producing fruit quickly, often within 2 to 3 years of planting. The The survival value of figs is in the dried fruit. Fresh figs are delicious but perishable. Dried figs store for over a year and are calorically dense, approximately 1,200 calories per pound. They're high in fiber, potassium, calcium, and natural sugars that provide quick energy. During sieges and famines in Mediterranean history, fig trees often meant the difference between survival and starvation. The trees continued producing when grain stores were depleted or destroyed. People with fig trees had food when trade routes were cut off. Figs also propagate easily from cuttings, which means one tree can become many trees. This allowed rapid expansion of food production without needing to purchase new trees. Plant a fig tree in a sunny location with decent drainage. In colder climates, choose cold-hardy varieties or protect the tree during winter. Water moderately during establishment. Harvest figs when they're soft and fully colored. Dry them in the sun or a dehydrator. You've just planted a tree that will produce hundreds of pounds of storable food per year for 50 to 100 years. 5. Apple trees, the northern staple. Apples are so common that people underestimate their survival value. A productive apple tree can yield 200 to 400 pounds of fruit per year once mature. That's a massive amount of food from a single tree. But the real value of apples is storage and versatility. Apples stored in cool conditions last 3 to 6 months fresh. Dried apples last over a year. Apple cider can be fermented and stored indefinitely. Before modern food preservation, apples were one of the few fruits that provided nutrition through winter. Historically, apple orchards were essential to food security in temperate climates. During the American colonial period, every homestead had an apple orchard because apples were reliable, productive, and storable. When grain crops failed, apples provided carbohydrates and vitamin C that prevented scurvy. Apple trees also tolerate cold better than most fruit trees, making them viable in northern climates where peaches, citrus, and figs won't survive. The downside is time. Apple trees take 6 to 10 years to reach full production. And most varieties need cross-pollination from a different apple variety to produce well, but once established, an apple tree produces for 50 to 80 years with proper care. Choose disease-resistant varieties suited to your climate. Plant at least 2 different varieties for cross-pollination. Be prepared to manage pests. Apples attract codling moths and other insects more than some other fruit trees. But the productivity justifies the effort. A family with 4 mature apple trees producing 200 pounds each has 800 pounds of apples annually. That's enough to eat fresh, dry for storage, make cider, and trade surplus. That's food security from trees you plant once and harvest for decades. 4. Carob trees, the chocolate that survives drought. Carob is the tree that nobody in temperate climates knows about, and that's a shame, because it's one of the most resilient food trees on the planet. Carob trees produce pods that taste remarkably like chocolate. The pods are naturally sweet, can be eaten raw, ground into powder as a cocoa substitute, or processed into syrup. A mature carob tree produces 200 to 400 pounds of pods per year. But here's what makes carob extraordinary for survival. It thrives in conditions that would kill most fruit trees. Extreme drought, poor rocky soil, intense heat. Carob is native to the Mediterranean and has been cultivated for over 4,000 years, specifically because it produces food in marginal environments where other crops fail. Carob pods store for years without processing. Just harvest them, dry them, and store them in a cool, dry place. They'll last 2 to 3 years easily. The pods are approximately 50% sugar by weight, plus fiber and minerals. They were used as emergency food during sieges and famines throughout Mediterranean history because they were reliable, storable, and nutritious. The pods were also used as a measure of weight. The word carat for measuring gemstones comes from carob seeds, which are remarkably uniform in weight. This tells you how valuable and widespread carob was historically. Carob trees are slow to establish. They take 6 to 8 years to begin producing, but once mature, they produce for 80 to 100 years with essentially zero maintenance. No pruning, no fertilization, no pest control. They just grow in harsh conditions and produce hundreds of pounds of sweet, storable food annually. The limitation is climate. Carob needs a Mediterranean or subtropical climate, mild, wet winters, and hot, dry summers. It's not cold hardy below about 20 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 6 degrees Celsius. But if you're in the right climate zone and you're planning for long-term food security in a warming, drying world, carob is one of the best bets you can make. Plant carob in full sun with excellent drainage. Water during the first 2 to 3 years until established, then ignore it. In 10 years, you'll be harvesting hundreds of pounds of sweet pods that store indefinitely and taste like chocolate. Not a bad investment. 3. Chestnut trees, the tree that fed. Europe. Before the chestnut blight of the early 1900s devastated American chestnut populations, Chestnuts were one of the most important food trees in temperate climates. In parts of Europe and Asia, they still are. A mature chestnut tree can produce 200 to 400 pounds of nuts per year. These aren't small nuts. Chestnuts are large, starchy, and filling. They're approximately 200 calories per 100 grams, which makes them more calorically dense than potatoes by weight. Chestnuts are unique among nuts because they're low in fat and high in carbohydrates. This makes them more like a grain than a nut nutritionally. You can roast them, boil them, grind them into flour for baking, or dry them for storage. In parts of Italy and France, chestnut flour was a staple food for centuries. Chestnut trees are massive and long-lived. They can live for 300 plus years and reach enormous sizes. A single tree can produce enough nuts to feed a family for months. The catch is time. Chestnut trees take 5 to 7 years to begin producing and 20 to 30 years to reach peak production. You're not planting for yourself. You're planting for your children and grandchildren. During famines in Europe, chestnut forests kept mountain communities alive when lowland grain crops failed. The trees grew on slopes and marginal land unsuitable for farming. They required no maintenance, they just produced year after year for centuries. American chestnuts were nearly wiped out by blight, but blight-resistant. Varieties have been developed. Chinese and European chestnuts are also available and blight-resistant. Choose varieties suited to your climate, plant them in well-drained soil, protect them from deer during establishment, and wait. In 10 years, you'll have modest production. In 30 years, you'll have massive production. 2. Walnut trees. Black gold. Walnut trees are dual purpose. They produce food and valuable timber. A mature walnut tree yields 50 to 80 pounds of nuts per year. That's 150,000 to 240,000 calories from a single tree. And walnuts store for over a year in the shell. And walnuts are nutritionally dense, high in omega-3 fatty acids, protein, and calories. They're one of the best plant sources of healthy fats. During food shortages, fats are often the hardest nutrients to obtain. Walnut trees solve this problem. Black walnut trees are native to North America and incredibly hardy. They tolerate poor soil, drought, and cold winters. They're also allelopathic. They produce a chemical called juglone that inhibits the growth of some other plants nearby. This means you need to plan carefully where you plant them, but it also means they face less competition. English walnuts, also called Persian walnuts, are less hardy but produce larger, thinner-shelled nuts that are easier to crack. Choose based on your climate and priorities. Walnut trees take 6 to 10 years to begin producing and 20 to 30 years to reach full production. But they live for 150 to 200 years. You're planting a legacy. Historically, walnut trees were planted along property boundaries and roadsides because they eventually became valuable timber. The food production was a bonus. A mature walnut tree can be worth thousands of dollars for the timber alone, but the annual nut production provides ongoing value. During the Depression, families with walnut trees had nuts to eat and sell. During World War II, walnut trees provided critical fats when meat and butter were rationed. The trees required no care, they just produced. Plant walnut trees away from gardens due to juglone. Water during establishment. Protect from deer and squirrels, then wait. In 10 years, you'll start harvesting. In 30 years, you'll be harvesting pounds of nuts annually. In 100 years, the tree will still be producing. And if you ever need to, you can sell the timber for serious money. 1. Oak trees. The civilization builder. Oak trees fed entire civilizations. Acorns were a staple food for indigenous peoples across North America, Europe, and Asia for thousands of years. A mature oak tree can produce 500 to 1,000 plus pounds of acorns per year. That's not a typo. Hundreds of pounds of food from a single tree annually for 300 plus years. Acorns are approximately 2,000 calories per pound. They're high in fats, carbohydrates, and protein. Processed correctly, they're nutritious and filling. The catch is that most acorns contain tannins that make them bitter and indigestible. They need to be leached, soaked in water repeatedly to remove the tannins before eating. But some oak species, particularly white oak varieties, produce sweet acorns with low tannin content that require minimal processing. Korean, Japanese, and some white oaks produce acorns that can be eaten with minimal or no leaching. Indigenous Californian tribes managed oak groves as food production systems. They cleared underbrush, protected trees, and harvested acorns as a primary food source. Acorn flour was ground and used to make bread, mush, and other staples. It wasn't supplementary food, it was the foundation of their diet. During famines in Europe and Asia, acorns were emergency food that saved lives. During the Korean War, acorns were a significant food source when other supplies were unavailable. The long-term food security value of oak trees is unmatched. You plant an oak tree today. In 20 years, it starts producing acorns. In 50 years, it's producing hundreds of pounds per year. In 200 years, it's still producing. Your great-great-great-grandchildren will be collecting acorns from a tree you planted. Oak trees also support ecosystems. They provide habitat for wildlife, improve soil, and create microclimates. They're drought tolerant once established and require zero maintenance. Choose oak species with sweet acorns if possible: Quercus alba, white oak; Quercus garryana, Oregon white oak; or Asian species like Quercus acutissima, sawtooth oak. Plant in full sun with good drainage. Protect from deer during establishment, and step back and let the tree grow for decades. The time factor: why you need to plant. Now, every year you delay planting, these trees is a year of production lost. An apple tree planted today will produce fruit in 6 to 10 years. An apple tree planted in 10 years will produce fruit in 16 to 20 years. The math is simple and unforgiving. The best time to plant these trees was 20 years ago when you didn't know you'd need them. The second best time is today, before you need them. Annual gardens are immediate gratification. You plant in spring, harvest in fall, eat what you grew. Trees are delayed gratification. You plant today and harvest in a decade. But that harvest continues for decades or centuries afterward. Think about this. If your grandparents had planted an oak tree when they were young, you could be harvesting hundreds of pounds of acorns right now. If you plant an oak tree today, your grandchildren will have that same opportunity. The real strategy: layered food security. You don't choose between annual crops and trees. You plant both. The annual crops feed you this year and next year. The trees feed you in 10 years, 30 years, 100 years. A complete food security system includes annual vegetables for immediate production, perennial crops like berries and asparagus for medium-term production, fruit and nut trees for long-term production. When you have all three, you're never dependent on a single timeline. If annual crops fail, you have perennials. If you can't plant this year, the trees keep producing regardless. The families that survived famines and food shortages best were the ones with diverse food sources across different timelines. They had grain stores from last year, crops growing this year, and trees planted decades ago still producing. Which trees to plant first? If you can only plant a few trees, prioritize based on your climate and timeline. Cold climates: apples, hazelnuts, walnuts. Moderate climates: add figs, mulberries, chestnuts. Warm/Mediterranean climates: focus on figs, mulberries, carob, and investigate citrus or other subtropical options. If you want production quickly, mulberries and figs produce in 2 to 4 years. If you're planning long-term, chestnuts, walnuts, and oaks produce for centuries. If you want maximum calories, oaks, chestnuts, walnuts. If you want drought-proof storage food, carob. If you want maximum nutrition diversity, plant a mix of fruit and nut trees. The universal rule: plant more than you think you need. Trees die, harvests vary, animals eat fruit. Weather damages trees. Overplant now and thin later if necessary. Annual crops are farming. Trees are legacy. When you plant a walnut tree today, you're not just feeding yourself in 10 years, you're feeding your children in 30 years. You're feeding your grandchildren in 60 years. You're creating food security that extends beyond your lifetime. That's power that annual gardens cannot match. That's resilience that seed packets cannot provide. The civilizations that thrived for centuries were the ones that planted trees. The families that survived multi-generational hardships were the ones with orchards and nut groves planted by their grandparents. You can be that ancestor. You can plant the trees that feed your descendants decades after you're gone. Or you can keep planting annual crops and hoping next year's harvest is enough. The choice is yours. But the best time to choose was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. If this changed how you think about food security and long-term planning, subscribe. I'll be covering more strategies that focus on building systems that last generations instead of solutions that last one season.